Good evening. Is that on? Yeah. Good evening and welcome to Candidates Night. Sponsored by the Sherborn Community Center Foundation, SOS, and the Sherborn Council on Aging. 3 wonderful organizations in our wonderful town. This evening we will hear presentations by 4 candidates. 2 of will be vying for a position on the Sherborn Board of Selectmen, and 2 vying for a position on the Dover-Sherborn Regional School Committee. Thank you for your attendance at this most important event. With that, let me introduce to you an individual highly involved in the past, the present, and the future of the town of Sherborn, Mr. Frank Jenkins.
Thank you, Mike. I am not a candidate, so I'm not running for anything, so take it all back. Anyway, how you doing this evening? Good to see a lot of happy faces, smiling. It's spring. Town meeting was last week. That's all behind us now. Now we look forward to our election next Tuesday. And as Mike said, SOS, the Community Foundation, and the Council on Aging have collaborated and decided to put on the Candidates Night tonight. Part of the process of doing that is finding a moderator. And this year we were very lucky to recruit Maria Caddison to be our moderator. Let me introduce you to Maria. She's new to Sherborn, having moved from Dover a few years ago. And in Dover, she was on the school committee over there. Here in Sherborn, her civic activities have been a advancement chair of the Boy Scouts, Troop 1, working with Mike Kickham. And she's also on the Capital Budget Committee, where she has served as chair. Professionally, Maria brings great credentials. She is CEO of Edwards Company, which is a strategic communications company focusing on higher education and nonprofit organizations. And she's well credentialed. She's a graduate of Emory University in Georgia and a graduate of Yale's Graduate School of Management with her MBA. So let me just turn it over to Maria to be our moderator for this evening. And she'll give you all the rules of the evening.
Hi everybody, I'm delighted to be here. We've got the whole night structured, so I'm going to tell you about the structure. First, we're going to acknowledge the uncontested candidates, those who may be in the audience. I'll do that in just a minute. Then we're going to go through the statement of ground rules for the contested candidates that are going to be here. First, we're going to hear from the Selectmen, and then we'll hear from the Regional School Committee candidates. Those are the 2 positions that are contested this year in Sherborn. So once we go through a series of questions for each of these positions, we will then open up to the audience. And Grace Shepard here in the first row is going to be collecting cards. If you have a question for any of the candidates for either session, please write it on a note card. There are cards and pencils on the table in the back there. And I'm going to signal you about halfway through the questions that it's time to get your questions into the middle of the audience because Grace needs some time to review the questions. If there are several that represent the same topic, she's going to consolidate them so that we can get as many topics in as possible. Okay, so I'll give you the cue when it's time to finish writing down and pull your cards into the center of the room. Okay. Any questions before we get started? All right, let's introduce any uncontested candidates who might be here. They might not be, but I've just asked you to stand up and wave your hand, and then you can sit right back down. So there's a position for the Selectmen that is not contested from Charles Yon. Is Charles here? Great. And then for assessor, Michael Goldstein. Is Michael here? All right back there. Trustee of Solon Academy, Georgia Brugman. Okay. Library trustees, there's 3 of them. Christopher Kenny. All right, Henry Rauch. Lisa Schwartz. Okay. Another library trustee, I don't know why this is separate, Bruce Ekman. Is Bruce here? Okay. Water Commissioner, Frank Hess. Cemetery Commissioner, Susan Tyler. Planning Board, William Dunham. All right, Board of Health, Rebecca O'Sullivan Hunnewell. Okay, and David Sossin? And then finally for Recreation Commissioner, Gavin Mish. Okay. All right, let's get started with the program. I'm going to read the ground rules first so that everybody knows. Let's see. I will begin to ask the questions. The candidates will each have 2 minutes to answer a question. I will start with each question. One candidate will start answering that question and the other one will get to say their answer. And then for the next question, the other candidate would start. So they're going to take turns starting, answering, and then the other one will follow with 2 minutes. I might ask one of them to follow up or ask a clarifying question. And if you have clarifying questions, make sure you write them on the card and those will be addressed later. When our time is up, I will let you know about halfway through again. I'm going to let you know when you should send your cards into the middle. So let me introduce the Selectmen candidates here. We have Eric Johnson, and each will have a chance to tell a little bit about their background specifically. And Frank Hoke. Right, okay, I was almost going to say Hex. Frank Hoke. All right, so let's get started. First question. Eric, would you like to start? How are you uniquely qualified or suited to be a selectman?
Thank you. Is this working? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. I believe I'll bring to Sherborn professional experience as I've been operating a municipal department, and I also have a very long history with the town, growing up here and growing through the school system. I currently manage a department that's actually larger than any other Sherborn department except for the schools and the police. I've done so within a community that's actually operated tax levies under the 2.5 limit. I have experienced how other municipalities handle certain issues, and I can bring insight, and I know people say that Sherborn is different, but I don't think it hurts to know how other people do things. I have active involvement with state agencies such as Mass DOT, Department of Public Utilities, Department of Environmental Protection, Environmental Restoration. I'm a current member of the Mass Military Association that reviews legislation on funding and infrastructure. And I was also a member of a Department of Public Utilities Commission as authorized by the state legislature. I have experience with capital planning as I've created the first 10-year plan for a large municipality. I'm also very familiar with development review for both Sherborn on the planning board. I've reviewed developments, and in my employed city, I've reviewed developments that's actually added up to over 1,000 new units throughout about 20 different developments. And I'm done.
Okay, terrific. Thank you, Eric. And Frank, how about you? How are you uniquely suited to be a selectman?
Well, first of all, thank you, Mrs. Caddison, for being here tonight and moderating this evening. And thanks to the COA, the members of the COA, the SOS, and the Sherborn Community Center Foundation for sponsoring this event. And thank you all for coming tonight. I feel that I'm uniquely qualified. When I look at our Board of Selectmen board, the Select Board has 3 lawyers and an accountant, financier. What our board is lacking is somebody with the ability to manage the bottom line and manage deadlines within our community. Somebody that has experience in managing people. I have been a chemist, and from chemistry I've become went into business, and as a businessman manage the sales and marketing of a company where I managed a sales and marketing team to increase the sales and revenues of our company, while doing that also within a financial level. After 18 successful years of managing a business, I transitioned into my passion, which is teaching, and within the teaching career, I've got a master's degree in education leadership, and I've really learned the workings of the school system, and as a result, I've worked tirelessly for our town on the school committee for 2 terms and 6 years, where I've worked to maintain the high quality and high level of our schools, while simultaneously managing the finances of our schools.
15 seconds left. 15
I have the time now that my kids are no longer at home to devote time and effort to the critical issues that Sherborn has facing it, and look forward to working to improve our town.
Great, thank you, Frank. And Frank, what do you hope to accomplish in your role as a selectman?
The things that I hope to accomplish as selectman, I love this town. What I think of when we moved to this town in 1994, 25 years ago, with my wife Diana and my children, was because of the school system. We have one of the best schools in the state. So we moved to Sherborn because of that, as many people do. Subsequently, we've come to fall in love with our town and the wonderful character and open spaces. What I would like to accomplish is that as we face the challenges moving forward, that we continue to make sure that we maintain our rural character and the green spaces and the wonderful qualities of our town, while managing the critical issues and problems that we have facing us. Some of the problems that we have facing us include the high property taxes and developments. So with that, what I would like to see is a plan to really look forward to the future, to make sure that we grow and we manage those issues, that we don't myopically look at the issues of property taxes without taking a better look at our rural character and the benefits of our town. I would like to see our community members be more engaged within our community, so that as their children move out of town, that they would stay within the town while enjoying the rest of the characteristics of our town. I would also work towards making a town center more active and beneficial for our senior citizens, so that they can walk and have more of an access within our town and have more things to do within our town.
15 seconds, Frank.
So as selectmen, what I would prioritize are planning for a future for our town and working towards building consensus to make sure that we have a town that we all want to continue to live in and continue to grow and continue to be a wonderful town.
Great, thank you. And Eric, what do you hope to accomplish in your role as a selectman?
I hope to round out the skill set of the selectmen. I believe bringing municipal operations and infrastructure experience will be a unique fit within the current board, and frankly even within future boards. I believe I can actually help utilize and access grant mechanisms to help some of these improvements, as well as future compliance issues. And I believe also I can give some insight to the Board of Selectmen on development and what's smart development. I know right now they rely heavily on the advice from other boards, and I believe I can actually give kind of that other look to it. And I know people see development as a dirty word, but I know in the last 20 years, Sherborn's approved a couple 40Bs, and the population has still decreased in town. The population is slightly smaller than it was when I was growing up here in the 1980s. My father and his family moved to town in 1929 to actually have a farm so that they could eat during the Depression. Other than that, it was pure sustenance farming. And Dad would speak about Sherborn then had 2 paved roads, and his own house had an outhouse and no running water. As much as he was lamenting those days, I'm glad we have more than 2 two paved roads, and I'm glad that their houses have running water. And I hope that in the future we can, and we've actually maintained a rural character. We have succeeded in doing that, and I believe we can still succeed to do that using mechanisms that are allowed and still have a reasonable, controlled development that gives some good base to the town.
Great, thank you. Okay, and Eric, what do you see as the most important issue that the town will need to address in the next 5 years? And what would be your specific approach to address this issue?
Can I name 2 issues?
We're asking you to do the most important one, so choose one.
All right. Then I'm going to go really the non-sustainable tax burden. Non-sustainable tax burden is the obvious one. I had a non-obvious one, but I have to go with the obvious one. We've basically pushed the 2.5 levy every single year. We've done overrides for debt services. We've even gone above that. And between the overrides in the 90s and early 2000s, we've actually averaged a 5% increase in taxes over the last 25 years. That, without question, is difficult. I have actually more solutions in the financial, but I can just repeat myself when I get there because it's kind of the same question onto that there. We absolutely, you know, we can cut budgets. We've done a good job cutting budgets, but frankly, the Board of Selectmen only have purview over 30% of the budget. And as much as I want to come here and tell you that I'm going to cut that in half and we're going to get the same amount of services, we're not. And we have to be realistic. We can still have to have tight rein over the budgets and proposals, but we have to actually look at alternative funding sources and strategies with that. I know right now Sherborn's one utility, the stormwater, we actually have a stormwater utility here in town. Effective July 1, it is going to be regulated such that the EPA is going to regulate the water quality out of 160 outfalls in this town. And since we're actually in the Charles River watershed, we're actually going to be more regulated than the 250 other towns that aren't in the watershed around the state. And you can do certain things there, such as stormwater utility fees, where people pay a proportionate amount based on their impact, no exemptions for nonprofits and state agencies. And you can also go for further grants that I've successfully acquired to help compliance with that mandate.
Great. Okay, thank you. And Frank, what about you? What do you see as the most important issue in the next 5 years, and what do you propose to do about it?
So I think the most important thing we have is to manage our future in our town. We're established in 1674. We've been able to maintain a rural character up until this point, and we're at a critical stage right now where we have a high property tax assessment at this rate. At this stage, our property tax is the second highest in the state at $15,400. A list we don't want to be #1 on. In fact, where we want to be #1 in schools, we want to be the lowest that we can on this list. While we manage that, we can't be myopic in looking at that. We need to create a long-term goal and plan to make sure that we develop and look at developments that are going to help with our tax rate as opposed to create additional burdens. We will have growth in town, but if we're not managing that growth in town, the growth is going to have a deleterious impact on our taxes. If we think of a town where we would increase our developments and have more lower cost single family homes, possibly, I love children, but if they all had 2 children, the cost of educating a student in our town is $18,800, and the cost of that kind of growth and development would have a major impact on our community. So we need to really plan the right type of a development so that we don't incur those debts. So one of the things I would look at is looking at our downtown and increasing the growth of our downtown and our strengths in our town, as well as looking at keeping people that are in our town, enjoying our town, and moving and staying in our town so that as their children leave, that they stay within the town.
Great. Okay, good. So going right off of that, with the prospects of 200 new housing units of various sizes within the next 5 years, Frank, how do you envision the town proactively modifying our current way of operating to accommodate new and diverse needs?
So I look at 200 new homes, and the first thing I look at is if we have a dense development, the effect of our rural character can be greatly impacted. And I don't think any of us want to see that. If we have apartments, a lot of families moving into town, where every family might have 2 children, that could end up increasing the number of students going to our school systems by 400. That could be a major challenge as well. So again, going back to that that plan, our vision and future plan is really critically important that we look at that, and we look at developments that are going to bring positive benefits within our town. If I look at, for example, Dover, who's similar to us, they have about over 200, about 300 more homes than we do, and that rural character is maintained. So depending on how the development and how the growth occurs within our town within the next 5 years is critically important. So I would look at the types of development, and the types of development will also have a major impact on our various government bodies. We need to look at our police department, our treasurer, assessors, and the entire workings of the government. So I think looking at the types of development that we would have is really critically important. So the downtown areas would be an area of growth where I would look at, as well as various
15 seconds, Frank.
Various different growth from larger, more rural type of settings to occur in our town. And we need to plan that in the best possible way.
Okay, thank you. Eric, and same question, with the prospects of 200 roughly new housing units varying in sizes within the next 5 years, how do you envision the town proactively modifying our current way of operating to accommodate new and diverse needs?
Well, that is interesting. First, I want to say I have some doubts to actually fill 200 units in 5 years. I could be wrong, but I know I look at the what is that, Rising Tide on Whitney Street there, and I think they're still struggling to fill some of those, but it could be wrong in that. I do think that the units that are proposed there on Coolidge Street probably will be have a higher demand to them due to proximity to the higher density areas and to the highways. But all that being said, the number one thing you got to do to actually adapt and be proactive around the demands that they'll make on our infrastructure and services, you have to see the demographics of who's moving in. You try to predict it, but you can't. I know, I'll say it, Framingham. The planned unit development in Framingham, 250 units went in. They were all targeted toward kind of a younger population, and they all got bought up by over 55. That same developer went and built an over 55 afterwards. Completely couldn't predict it, and there's different impacts. If you have over 55, they actually have more impact on emergency services. A younger population has more impact on schools. And then if you can look at that, then you can proactively see the first 25% that's moving in. You can then proactively adjust your services accordingly. Something else I think it's very important to do with these new developments, all new developments, you have to make sure the home associations and management companies are providing the appropriate services to residents. It's been happening more also around the country, but now it's happening in Milford and other surrounding communities where these developments are large enough, they have a large voting base, and they actually pressure future governments to basically take over the services, take over the plowing, take over the pavement, and so on like that. And it's because the homeowners associations are not managing them. And although it takes just, quite a bit, minimal effort, but they do have to be staying on top of.
15 seconds, Eric.
Okay, and just make sure that they are being compliant with their own rules and regulations and what's agreed upon within the decisions.
Okay, good, thank you. All right, Eric, we'll start the next one with you. The Sherborn Advisory Committee has strived to reduce the tax rate through tight budgeting and paying the select capital expenditures with free cash rather than bonding to reduce debt service costs. How do you see your role in keeping tax rates from escalating and, in fact, continuing to push them lower?
And this is where I have to be a little repetitive from the previous question, because when I had to pick one thing, that's kind of our worst thing coming up. Well, guess what? It's taxes, so you just asked me the same question.
Okay.
But all that being said, it's a reminder that, the selectmen have purview over essentially 30% of the budget. I'll talk a little more about that on the next question as well. And I don't think anyone can really say they're going to slash that. Right now we're at the point, because there have been good efficiencies done over the last several years, to bring that into a pretty tight, efficient budget. And I think there are some more efficiencies in there, but even then, you efficient 10%, that's only 3% of the budget, that's one levy, whatever else. We have to look at alternative funding sources, and it's like I spoke about, either the utility fee for the stormwaters, look at strategic grants, particularly when developments go in, it becomes pretty easy to get these mass work development grants. Framingham acquired a couple of them, over $1 million each, that's helped to actually do improvements and help cut long-term expenditures. And we have to actually look at some smart development, where it makes sense and where it doesn't. I completely agree with Frank that, yeah, you have this tight little dense development in the middle of nowhere. It doesn't really make sense, but sometimes it does in certain locations. And if we take control of that, particularly with the housing plan, which I think is a good report, you start taking control and being proactive with that, you can actually attract the type of developers you want and work with them versus working against them. I think if anything we've learned in the last 20 years, working against a developer does not get what you're looking for in the long run.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. And Frank, I'll read the same question for you. The Sherborn Advisory Committee has strived to reduce the tax rate through tight budgeting and paying for select capital expenditures with free cash rather than bonding to reduce debt service costs. How do you see your role in keeping tax rates from escalating and, in fact, continuing to push them lower?
So I've worked with the advisory while I was on the school committee, and I certainly applaud them for their hard work and their effort. We've worked together very well in trying to maintain the budgets within our schools, and we've worked very hard to maintain the level set by both the selectmen and by the advisory. In terms of the capital expenditures, it's very important to try to manage those costs and plan for those costs. So it's critically important that we try not to pay for them out of bonds, but try to pay for them out of free cash. It's one of the things that I tell and teach my personal finance students, that live within your means and plan and save for the expenses that are going to be coming in advance. The cost of bonds and borrowing money, the interest rates really create an increase in the cost of the items that we purchase. So working with advisory and the other departments in town would be absolutely key to making sure that we stay within our budget and we stay within our plan so that we can actually manage financially our future, as opposed to having to react and take out overrides and use bonds to pay for our expenses. I also go back to the fact that we need to reduce our tax base, and by reducing our tax base would actually increase the amount of free cash that we would have. So when those times come when we would have to purchase those capital equipment or get to the point where the larger ticket items are required, that we would have the finances in free cash to be able to take care of those costs without having to go to bonds and overrides.
Okay. And Frank, I'm going to ask a follow-up question to that. What do you mean by reduce our tax base?
So our tax rate, our average tax rate in town is the second highest in the state. Is at $15,400. So with that rate being what it is, with new development, the idea would be is to try to reduce that number. But there's also the issue of expenses and costs. So if we keep people in town for longer periods of time, that they don't leave right after their children go out of school, leave school, that the expense incurred would be reduced, so that we wouldn't have as high taxes, because we wouldn't be paying as much for schools because of that.
Okay. All right. And Eric, I want to give you a second. Is there anything that you wanted to say on that topic? You don't have to. It's up to you.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Okay, Frank, on to the next question. Total school expenses, including health insurance and non-teacher retirement, continue to drive the size of our budget and the tax rate and tax bills of the town. All in, 70% of the town's budget is devoted to the schools. How would you suggest the town balance the cost of the schools with other town services?
First of all, being on the school committee for 2 terms for 6 years, I've had the opportunity to work with the budget and manage the budget and work with advisory. And I must say that we've done, at the time, an excellent job, and I know that we're continuing to do the same, of maintaining the cost of our schools. We really operate an efficient school system for the quality of schools that we're providing to our students and the quality of education. With that said, we need to continue to work towards reducing those any kind of costs that we can within the town, but there's not that much more leeway within the schools to manage that. So we need to look at bringing in revenue into our town through the development and through our developments and the planned growth. So by planning our development growth will help to bring in revenue as opposed to looking at reducing the cost of the school systems. The other thing I would say, and what we worked really hard on when I was on the school system, was a revenue generating technique. We kind of got this idea from the parents and our parent-teacher organizations, where our parents and teachers provided additional income to the schools through the PTOs, the CSAs, the DESF, monies that they would donate. And if we take a little bit wider approach than that, a wider umbrella, our quality students are also providing a service to our community, and our community and our businesses can then work with businesses and create business partnerships to generate continued revenue to offset some of those expenses.
Okay, great, thank you. And Eric, the same question. Total school expenses, including health insurance and non-teacher retirement, continue to drive the size of our budget and the tax rate and tax bills in our town. All in, 70% of the town's budget is devoted to the schools. How would you suggest the town balance the cost of the schools with other town services?
Thank you. Yeah, one of the issues I guess I have, and everyone references it, oh, that's a school budget and that's the town budget. One of the things, there has to be some merging of the services. I know either with perhaps the buildings and buildings and ground services, there's still some separation. There's been some merging recently, and I think there has to be a little bit more merging within that, because just essentially the school entity is large enough that it can actually provide quite a few services and actually do a little bit more sharing within that. Other than that, the other thing I was thinking about is coordinate public meetings for the budgets, specifically between the school committee and the selectmen. They do, I know they communicate, but it still acts like two islands, and it's, all since whatever the act was in the 1960s, actually created the school committees and pulled schools essentially out of the general budget process. And that might be a good thing because it protects the schools, but we still can't turn a blind eye to what each group is doing. Some municipalities actually put executive representation from the municipality on the actual school committee. I don't think we could do that with some kind of a special rule or on a charter, but that's something I think we really should look at. It'll actually help with overall accountability too. So everyone's not saying, well, that's that budget and I got to take it. It'd be nice actually if there was a greater level of accountability on that level, and not the classic, us and them type mentality there. That, and it's interesting too, actually, because the selectmen actually have representation on many town departments, so, and many boards. Either unofficial or official representations will be, this is the selectmen's appointee. Let's have something like that on the school budget, and maybe even vice versa as well.
15 seconds.
Okay. I'm done with that one.
Okay, good. All right, so now I'm just going to mention to the audience, if you have additional questions, mark them on the cards and send the cards into the aisle, and Grace will collect them.
Wasn't there one more question?
There's a few, but yeah, I wanted to give them time to write them down and sort. Okay, so while that's happening, we're going to go on to the next question. Eric, you're first on this one. Unlike our 10 to 20-year capital investment plans for town buildings and the schools, Sherborn currently does not have a long-term operating plan and operating budget projections. For example, there's no annual allocation for cost-effective building maintenance. We don't address problems until they become so big that we must spend capital funds to fix them. What would you want to do to address this issue?
And that's not uncommon. People like to build things. They get a capital appropriation, and then they build it, and it looks cool. But very few municipalities we'll actually go and factor in, okay, what is the lifetime cost of that? Be it even as simple as something as putting in the cost of heat and HVAC to something far more, okay, what's the plan to remove rugs? They last 10 years. Program that in. That's something that can be done, and I actually do believe I can bring my skills to actually do that, to actually go in and do, yes, program it out. And if something doesn't need replaced, but at least it's been programmed in there, you're always at an advantage in that way, and then you can know the long term. And even though this question actually talked about, I think was talking more about structures and buildings, I also want to make sure that we actually predict out salary costs as well. You know, we have a pretty known staffing levels. Don't have a whole lot of turnover. You can predict, be a teacher or a town staff or police. You can program out step increases. A lot of them are union contracts. You can predict these things out 10-year, make them very predictable. Integrate that now with the building capital planning, and then you know what your burden is in the future, and you can adjust accordingly.
Okay, good, thank you. Frank, same question for you. Unlike our 10 to 20-year capital investment plans for the towns and the schools, Sherborn currently does not have a long-term operating plan and operating budget projections. What would you want to do to address this issue?
While I was on the school committee, the capital study was done where that came out with the initial plan, and we've been using that to help plan our fiscal future, and it's worked very well. Mm-hmm. We certainly have to do the same thing for maintenance and preventive maintenance within our buildings and within our town. Here at the community center, we have a gorgeous building, and if we constantly work on looking at our preventative maintenance. It's one of the things that we spend a lot of our time doing. Could you imagine if we didn't take care of our roof, for example, and something would happen where rain would come through, we'd destroy a very expensive roof. So the cost of repair would be significantly higher if we weren't managing that in advance. So first of all, I would recommend and suggest that we have an organization go through and provide a look at our various buildings within our town, provide us with a report of a preventive maintenance schedule so we can look at this and then work within a construct to develop the finances to make that happen. Planning our costs is the most important thing that we do. It's one of the things that I teach my students and in my personal finance class, as well as what we need to do here in our town. So I would work very carefully then with the various different managers of the various different departments to make sure that we implement that plan, and if we need to modify that plan and work towards that plan. Thank you.
Okay, great. So next question, Frank, this is for you to start. Sherborn has now established a town planning document which includes addressing the needs for new development of a more varied mix of housing types, along with improvements to the commercial district. What is your vision for town center development?
I'm in favor of town center development. I think that's one of the things that we need to do to help us through our this financial process. I've looked at the town document. It still says draft on it. You have to kind of go through the website to find it. What I would like to see is that this document, this plan, be brought out to the public, listen to comments, solicit comments, get feedback, modify the plan, get consensus on what a plan could be, and then get it implemented as quickly as possible so that we can start utilizing the plan to grow our town, whether it be the center of town or, for that matter, the other areas of town. And once we have that plan, then we can even start being proactive in how we can deal with some of the issues in the center of town being the issue with lack of water and the sewer systems, that we can look at how we run our stormwater runoffs, where we put capture basins and so on to be able to deal with the issues needed. So having a long-range plan is critically important, and it will also ultimately help us to save costs as we as we grow and develop within our town, because we'll know what some of the issues are, and we could address those issues in advance as opposed to waiting to the last minute.
Okay, thank you. Eric, now for you, the same question. Sherborn has established a town planning document which includes addressing the needs for new development of a more varied mix of housing types, along with improvements to the commercial district. What is your vision for town center development?
I agree with Frank, is that downtown development should be encouraged. It is where development is supposed to happen in a downtown. And I believe in a mixed-use development down there, certainly with a greater variety of commercial opportunities where it starts to become a hub and not just a place to do errands. You know, it's still the #1 spot where, you know, you see people is the transfer station. I'm sure I'll see you next week when I give you a card. I do support the mixed use of that, also because people are actually craving that nowadays. People like living where they can be near resources, they can be near stores, and they don't have to get in their car. I'm pretty sure everyone here hates the 25,000 cars a day that go between those two splits, but to some degree, I know that certain businesses have actually looked at this area because it's an asset to certain things like a coffee shop or a Starbucks or something like that. And I think we do need to capitalize that. And I agree with the water and sewer. I don't know how many of you know this, but for the last 10, 12 years, I've been assisting the water commissioners with actually looking at water and our sewer solutions to the downtown Sherborn. And it's complicated. I don't think we need to put something in that's just like a complete plant or that, but we can actually take strategic look at either shared septics and shared waters to put us back in compliance, because right now we don't comply with our own regulations for distances between water and sewer. And I think shared sources and without the overlapping zones will help that and give flexibility for uses such as additional restaurants. I believe I could actually help push this through for the selectmen. Since I've been working on this, the selectmen have kind of kept kicking it back to study. I don't know if anyone deals with state legislature, but if you kick something to study, the bill's dead. And you know, they came initially, I think it was to Roger, and we're helping them out, and we're looking at stuff, and we answered some questions, and they said, well, look at it some more. And that's happened 3 times, to the point where it's kind of impacted the morale, I think, to the group a little bit. And I believe that if I was on the Board of Selectmen, we could actually either put it to bed or take it to resolution and take it so we could take a good package to the community to make a decision.
Okay, great. So I'm going to ask each of them to wrap up the final 2 minutes of what they want to say, and then we're going to start with the audience questions, and we'll proceed the same manner. We'll ask each question, and each one will be able to answer the question. So, Eric, you get to start now. In the final 2 minutes that each of you have, are there any other issues that we haven't covered that you would like to address to the audience?
Well, there is some of the issues that I believe I could help with. I did talk about the regulation of the town stormwater that I do want to comment on, that at least in the 12 and a half, 13 years that I've been working with municipalities, it is the single largest unfunded mandate I've ever seen come down, and it's only going to increase. Something I don't want people know that actually right now Mass DOT bought the railroad tracks through town, and they're actually piloting a commuter rail to actually test out the commuter rail from Framingham to Foxborough. There's going to be hearings about that, because right now it's kind of quaint. We have, you know, I mean, it's not quaint if you live next to it, but we have, you know, 2 trains a day going 20 miles an hour. We're going to have a lot more going a lot faster. That's why you see the new rail, and that's why you see the new ties. And I've been in tune with some of those public hearings, and I think the community needs to actually engage with Mass DOT immediately to actually start any kind of mitigation, up to even including a silent zone for the town, which would actually help property values. The third thing I want to look at, I think, is some of the problem, but I just want to encourage people. Sometimes I find my own frustration with certain lack of involvement with citizenship. Anyone that's seen me in the planning board with the large controversial meetings, I always try to re-engage people. So I encourage anyone to vote, even if you're not going to vote for me. Vote and volunteer. Active citizenship drives a town, any town, and it'll die without it. The town form of government is the ultimate voice of the citizens, and it's comprised really of volunteers with just a handful of actual professionals to support it. So if I leave you with anything, please come out and vote May 8th, and please be active in your community.
Thank you, Eric. And Frank, in the final 2 minutes that you have, are there any other issues that we haven't covered that you would like to address?
One of the areas that I would like to address is safety within our town and within our schools. We've seen an increase in mass shootings in our country lately, and these shootings have occurred in places that are very similar to towns like Sherborn. Newtown, Connecticut, Parkland, Florida. We are not exempt from any of this kind of issues as well. So we need to create a dialogue that includes more than just our wonderful law enforcement and school committee to address these issues. We need to have a larger consensus looking at what where the problem areas are and resolve those issues. When my daughter was in 4th grade, she was on the bus and there was a student on the bus who got very boisterous, very upset, and said he was going to be shooting up everybody at school the next day. Created enough of a concern that the principal got involved with a various number of other parents to try to solve the problem, and it did. We're not exempt from this, is my point, even though we're a small little town. The second thing I would also advocate, similarly to what Eric mentioned, is the involvement of our citizens, not only within the political process, but also within our volunteer process. We have wonderful organizations with our town, including the COA with our senior citizens. We have the Community Center Foundation with the Friends of the Library, the Garden Club, SBA, and a variety of other but by people getting more involved, donating, giving their time and treasure to these organizations will help to connect them to the town, engage them more to the town, create a greater community within our town, stay within our town, which would ultimately provide a better town and community for us all.
Okay, good. All right, the first question from the audience, Frank, you can take this. What are your concerns and plans regarding serving our seniors better? Will you support a senior center, for example?
I think I've mentioned that the seniors in that group is very important. I think keeping them in town is critical. I think that having a more vibrant downtown with more access to downtown is important to help senior citizens within our town have more access and be able to do the things that they would want. We certainly have the community center where some of the things that could be done for a senior center. So movie nights, things like that could happen at the community center. Would I support a community center? Well, I would certainly want to listen to a proposal from them, and then, basically, based on that conversation and discussion, go forward with a further discussion and decision on whether we move in that direction or not.
All right, and Eric, how about you? What are your concerns and plans regarding serving our seniors better? Would you, for example, support a senior center?
Yeah, I would support a senior center, particularly if it was, we say well thought up, also well placed. There is a center right now with Abbey Road going in and next to Woodhaven, where there's a pretty strong density there, and I'd hope to cite something in that immediate vicinity. Anyone who saw me in the planning board knows that I was always pushing for that sidewalk in front of Abbey Road to actually have connectivity to the 3 largest developments, or 3 in downtown, right in further into downtown. I'd like to have somewhere where actually seniors can actually access without driving and give open access to a community center sited in that area. And also knows my mother is in Woodhaven, and I joined them on a lot of their activities there. And it's actually very, very, very vibrant, but it's still limited in space, and actually some people don't attend due to space limitation. It'd be nice to have that central asset. And also something too in which give people a reason not to move out when the kids graduate. Give kind of, already Sherborn has by a lot the highest average age of the surrounding communities. So when kids are graduating, people are in their 60s and they're already there, and it'd be nice to have some kind of center and attraction to keep people in town.
Okay, good. Second question from the audience. Eric, you get the first dibs on this. What is your understanding of the style of policing your police department provides to the community?
So I looked up some stats. In fact, when I first started running for Selectmen, I actually talked to a handful of people. I talked to David, and I talked to Rick, and I kind of reached out to get some ideas, and I looked up some stats. And interesting, Sherborn has the second lowest assaults in the surrounding area, and the lowest what's called property crimes, such as break-ins. And assaults have a certain behavioral aspect to it that is out of police's control. But interestingly, the break-ins, I think, are a direct nature of proactive policing. I grew up here in town with police, and I think they are definitely evolved. And not to ding the past, but I'm just saying it's gotten better over the years. And I believe with the proactive policing, to basically get in front of stuff, to reach with the students, to I know people hate when I say this, but to do traffic management and to do moving violations, and that helps you kind of assess. Assess essentially a certain assess what's going on. And I think that actually helps that proactive. And that's why, think about it. We have the lowest property break-ins of surrounding communities, and everyone I talk to doesn't lock their car. Are we on TV? Okay.
We are on TV, yes. Erase that part for the
It's not on YouTube, right? So that is absolutely, I believe, an effective form of policing.
Okay, good. And Frank, what about you? What's your understanding of the style of policing that our police department provides to the community?
I have to agree with Eric that our police department is very proactive and does a wonderful job of keeping our town safe, and I would encourage that to continue. The focus on public safety is always there. Rick and his team are always looking at ways to make sure that we're staying safe within the community. He's always got his thumb on the pulse of our community. So when we have, for example, any kind of an event or activity here within the community center, we always run our activities by Rick Thompson so that we can make sure that he signs off on it, whether we need to have police details or not. So that he maintains to make sure that nobody's going to get hurt, that there are no accidents, and that there's no troubles. And when we've had troubles, they've been right on it, proactive, and they've taken care of it, and that makes sure that they haven't gotten out of hand. I applaud their work. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Frank, so this next question is for you to start. Can you suggest how best the town could spur development of affordable housing units to get the town in safe harbor status, protected from 40Bs?
Would you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Can you suggest how best the town could spur development of affordable housing units to get the town in safe harbor status, protected from 40Bs?
So I've thought about that a lot. What I would like to see in Sherborn, as we talked about in the development within the center of town, if we look at some of the other towns within our community, and for that matter, some of the other cute towns that we can compare ourselves with, Woodstock, Vermont, Camden, Maine, but even Wellesley and Natick town centers, where they have some of their more historic areas. One of the things that they've done, which I think are really a good ideas, where they have commercial entities below with living quarters above, where we can have affordable housing, but we have multiple types of development happening really in the same space, in the same footprint of land, bringing in not only the tax revenue that we need, creating the vibrancy within our town, but also providing an exciting place for people to live where all the action is happening, and yet could be not such large properties.
Okay. And Eric, can you suggest how best the town could spur development of affordable housing units to get the town in safe harbor status, protected from 40Bs?
It really is, as I mentioned before, you need to work with developers. So the next proposal that comes in on the next 40B, I think it's successful what they did with the last one. And I know it's very controversial, and I probably lost 20 votes just by saying that. But really, by negotiating the for sale units to be below 25%, and then allowing the rental units, because when rental units meet the 25%, the whole development counts toward your 40B. That's really where the big numbers are going to happen. We could literally be one development away to actually be at safe harbor. So it really is working with developments. The proposals are what they are. You can't control what land goes up to sale to some degree, unless the town sells it itself. But when a development comes in, it is about controlling that development. And we are seeing market responses. You know, I think some of the reasons that we've seen some limited of the large ones is due to the, you know, the Whitney Farms didn't sell real well right away. Seems like they reinvented themselves, lowered some prices. But the ones you'll see on Coolidge Street, they're going to, you know, they had a certain popularity because they were near the denser towns. And that's kind of what people are looking for. So I think when some proposal comes in, you got to engage with the developer, and you got to get something that makes sense to them and help us achieve that goal. And I think we're close to doing that.
Okay, good. We're going to take one more question from the audience because we want to save ample time for the regional school committee candidates as well. Eric, this is for you to start off with. Actually, hang on one second. Okay. The Select Board is overseeing the potential impacts of the General Chemical Company site on Sherborn's water resources. As a member of the Select Board, how would you address this threat going forward?
Now that is a good one, because that's a very, very complicated. I do know a little bit about that release. It's basically, I used to work in that world a little bit. It's a chlorinated solvent release, which means it's actually sinking deep and it's going within the fractures. No one found it forever, and then boom, it pops up near Coolidge Street. And that one is very, very complicated. On that one there, without question, DEP takes primacy on to how you actually respond to those actions. I think the main thing a community can do is actually decide, okay, do we provide alternate water or not, and how proactive do we get, and how much investment do we want to have to actually go after those pollutants. In a certain case, of course, the parent company and sister company and mother company of General Chemical and all they had out of New Jersey, I know for, you know, I've either called bankruptcy or something, and DEP still chasing after them just to even do the basic minimum there. And that is a challenge, there's no question about that. For the few homes that are currently impacted, you're going to have to provide alternate water supplies for those, and you're going to have to be cautious onto those Coolidge Street developments when you actually have them go on water. In general, too, something I want to say when I was on the planning board, I've always pushed for single groundwater supplies for those developments. The developers often want to put like one per house or one per two houses because then they get under the whole rule about public water supply, and I strongly disagree with that. When you have a single well, you now have a public water supply. It's held to a higher, much greater threshold on what they're doing, and it's much easier to treat if you in the unfortunate circumstance, if you have to. So I think we should continue to keep our eyes on those solutions.
Okay, great. And Frank, the Select Board is overseeing the potential impacts of the General Chemical Company site on Sherborn's water resources. As a member of the Select Board, how would you address this threat going forward?
So, on the Select Board, we would need to pretty much look at what all the options are. Eric has certainly mentioned some of what those options would be. We'd have to get somebody, a professional in to be able to, an engineering service in to be able to give us what the cost would be for treating the contaminants in that water versus what would be General Chemicals liabilities versus if they're not available to take care of those the financing for cleaning up the chemicals, to look at see if there's a possibility to get the state, or for that matter the EPA, to come in to help clean up that and pay for the cost of that. Those are really big and major issues. Companies in the past have gone bankrupt with those types of systems. There are brownfield situations where the government has come in and worked to help to pay and do some of the cleanup. So I would work with an engineering company to come up with those kinds of solutions. Thank you.
Great. All right, well, I want to thank Frank Hoke and Eric Johnson. We appreciate your time, and I would like to invite up Judy and Vicki.
And I would like to ask if anyone wants a card to the second round. First one is included, I'm sorry.
I can get one over here that's unused. I can get one over here that's unused. Do you vote for me? Okay, do you want to do that? Thank you. Vicky, how do you pronounce your last name? Is it Relas or Relis? Yes, Relis.
Greek. Everybody says Rhea, but it's Greek.
Oh, okay. All right.
Hello? Yeah, that's what I was trying to do.
I'll turn them on. Don't touch them.
Right.
I've learned over the years not to touch them.
What thing should be up? Like this? Okay.
All right, everybody, let's settle down so we can get started. Taking pictures, okay. Okay, so we're going to be listening to two candidates for the Regional School Committee. We have Judy Miller and
Hello.
Vicki
Relis.
Relis. You just told me how to pronounce it. I'm the worst. Vicki Relis.
Sorry.
So we're going to have the same ground rules as we did for the Selectmen. And we're going to start now with Judy. So first question is, in 2 minutes, we're going to do the timing, the same routine. How are you uniquely suited to join the Regional School Committee?
Thank you. I would like to start out by thanking our moderator and the Sherborn Community Center Foundation, SOS, and the Council on Aging for hosting this event. As many of you out there know, I have practiced labor and employment law for more than 30 years, and I won't tell you how many more than 30 years. And so I bring to the school committee skills that I don't believe anyone else on the school committee has. I know we have someone who has an MBA, but I have spent my career, dealing with employment issues such as I have negotiated hundreds of contracts, I have negotiated collective bargaining agreements, and I have advised employers on a myriad of employment issues. So I bring that skill to the school committee. But I also am a small business owner. I have my own law practice for the last 20 years, and so I know what it's like. I know how important it is to keep costs down when you're running anything. In addition, I have held leadership roles both in organizations devoted to the school and in the town of Sherborn. I served for 3 years from 2008 to 2011 on the Personnel Board. I was on the Dover Sherborn Friends of the Performing Arts from 2011 to 2017, serving as the Vice President from 2012 to 2014, and then as the President from 2014 to 2017. I have also served on 3 committees. Thank you. 3 committees.
15 seconds.
Selection committees, one for town administrator in 2011, one for the assistant superintendent in 2012. So I have both professional experience and experience with town and the schools.
Okay, thank you. And Vicki, how are you uniquely suited for the Regional School Committee?
I would like to thank everyone for participating in this candidates night as well. I'm getting a little bit of a cold, so I apologize in advance if I start coughing or something. You can all stay away from me later. I lived in Sherborn for over 18 years, and I've been a member of the Sherborn Advisory for the last 6 years. And as a member, I've seen the results of 4 school administrations and their budgeting efforts. Because of this, I've had a unique view and understanding of the budgeting process, how it works, and the committees that work with them. The skills I have developed here are listening and seeking out the needs, desires, hopes, and problems that different constituencies face. In addition, I've also been the liaison to the Sherborn School Committee for the last 3 years and attended many regional school committee meetings. One distinctive experience I've also had is that we've had meetings, annual meetings with a Dover warrant to discuss the issues in the regional school system and the budgeting that needs to go forward. Personally, I've been active in the schools since my children attended the Dover-Sherborn school system and was on the CSA and president for 1 year as well. I've also been an active substitute teacher, so I've had a very good bird's eye view of what goes on inside the schools for many years. And I have a degree in education from Framingham State University. I was a teacher in the Plymouth school system until I moved to New York City, and the finance bug bit me. Since then, I've been in the financial and investment field. I've owned my own businesses. When I was in the investment field, I worked with many pension funds. And I've also, in the recent past, been an entrepreneur, a Dunkin' Donuts franchisee, and involved in many other ongoing entrepreneurial activities. So I bring the bird's eye view of being in the schools, I bring this being on the advisory board, and I also am involved with creating and managing businesses, so I have a myriad of opportunities to bring to the table.
Okay, good. And the next question, Vicki, you can start. What do you hope to accomplish in your role as a school committee member?
I believe that managing the Dover-Sherborn Regional School System is analogous with running a corporation. As with most corporations, the costs and expenses are one of the major concerns. My role in advisory has been to work with the administrations, past and present, to begin to utilize a new way of budgeting in order to have a realistic and consistent perspective of current and future expenses while learning from the past. The last few years of the budgeting process have been very encouraging in that we have worked to create a system that has actually achieved cost savings, minimized increases, while maintaining the highest educational standards. With fiscal responsibility, we have not given up on the quality of our programs. Implementing this budget management process and helping administration incorporate it has been most beneficial for Sherborn and most personally rewarding for me. That said, I will strive for the following during my tenure. I'll assist with administrations and a regional school committee's ability to work within the guidelines Sherborn Advisory has put forth for its annual budget. I will create a better understanding of Sherborn's goals and budgeting and fiscal restraints. I will bring an awareness of programs that may enhance students' ability to adapt to a changing work environment, for example, technology and entrepreneurship. I'll manage expectations and create awareness for town citizens regarding the process of managing the school system, as it is very important for parents and other interested persons to know about the workings of our school district and for the school committee members to be aware of what is important for our community. And most of all, putting plans, systems, and procedures in place to accomplish desired outcomes and priorities that will provide continuous improvement in the system for student achievement.
Okay. And Judy, what do you hope to accomplish in your role as a school committee member?
Well, I think Vicki's right that budgeting and maintaining close reins on the budget is crucial. But my vision is not just for the budget of the school district, but also to educate our children. The paramount purpose of the school district is to educate our children and to continue our status as one of the best school districts in the country. We can at the same time work on creative solutions to increase efficiencies so that our schools can operate on a budget that we can afford. I agree with the importance of that, but there is much more to being on the school committee than simply financial control. I also want to continue to work toward educational excellence while supporting our students' social and emotional well-being. As our world becomes more and more globalized, we need to prepare our students for ever-changing challenges that they will face in college and beyond. You know, the Dover-Sherborn Regional School District is a really special organization. My daughter graduated, our youngest graduated a year ago, and I've spent a great deal of time, I spent a great deal of time over the last 6 years or 8 years that my kids were in the school, really working toward making it an exceptional place. It is exceptional because we don't pay our teachers the most of any school district, and yet it is an incredibly desirable place to work.
15 seconds.
Okay. And I think that that's an incredibly important goal to continue to pursue. That is the excellence in the education that we're providing to our students.
Okay. Judy, thank you. And you're the first for the next question, which is, what do you see as the most important regional school issue that the committee will need to address over the next 5 years, and how would you represent Sherborn's interest within the regional school committee?
You know, it's interesting. While I think that educational excellence, as I just said, is incredibly important, there's another issue that I'm really passionate about, and what it has to do with, and it's in Dr. Keogh's his recent 5-year plan, which is creating other sources of revenue and cost-saving measures. When I was the president of FOPA, we changed the way in which we did fundraising by instituting an auction rather than simply sending out letters and asking for money, and we increased our budget by 5-fold. We were able to, with that money, contribute to a new extension for the stage at Mudge, new recording equipment for the recording studio at the high school, and keyboards to be used by the entire region, portable keyboards. It's a very small example of how we can leverage our resources to create additional sources of revenue. At one point there was a proposal to put a cell tower up at the high school. While that proposal failed, I think that exploring other ways in which we might find sources of revenue is really important. I think coordination between DSEF and the other organizations that support the schools and contribute money is important. I think that that we should tap into other individuals who might want to make contributions to the schools. I also think on a cost basis, finding creative solutions to problems like the cost of SPED,
seconds.
Thank you, are incredibly important. Thank you.
Right. Thanks. And Vicki, what do you see as the most important regional school issue that the committee will need to address over the next 5 years, and how would you represent Sherborn's interest with the regional school committee?
Well, I have a little bit of a problem with the question because I don't think there's one situation. I think there are many. And to that end, the contenders that I have for number one all together are healthcare costs, OPEB costs and how to manage them, SPED cost, teacher salary construct, and how we have to continue to educate teachers regarding the resources and fiscal limitations that Sherborn has versus other like towns. And I think we can do this while maintaining the same quality of standard of education that we have. So, you know, I think that within all of that, there's revenue enhancements that can be made. I think that there's ways that we can, you know, look. I think it's, for me, watching the budgets come through in the last 6 years, I've really been proud of the school committees and the way that they've managed administrations, the way that they've come through and looked at what costs that they really can control and what they need to do. But also, I think, as Judy said, looking at other sources of revenue that we can bring in, and you know, getting ideas from the communities of ways we can enhance that. So, you know, if you want to look at the most important regional issues, I think that there are 5 of them that we need to look at, because I think the 2 top ones are healthcare and OPEB that we need to control, that if we don't look at those very seriously, it could be major problems down the road.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, and Vicki, the original regional school agreement was signed back in 1952. Much has changed since then. The Dover population has grown faster than Sherborn. Land values have increased faster than in Sherborn's, and generally Dover's school budget as a percent of the town's budget is less than Sherborn's. Should this agreement be reopened and reconsidered to reflect the 2018 situation?
As I read the agreement, it was created in a spirit of cooperation and shared ideals regarding education. The basic tenet of the agreement, being allocation of expenses and costs based on usage, is the most logical way to proceed. My personal opinion is that pursuing this change is a zero-sum game. Looking at usage is really the only way you can allocate the costs and expenses. What we should do is look for ways to build on our partnership. One example is the crosstown relationships, the crosstown relations, the meetings that we've had with Dover Warrant, and also, joint meetings with Dover Warrant and the Regional School Committee. They've been developed, and it's allowed us to get a perspective of what Dover is looking at, and then so they can give perspective of what we're looking at and the constraints that are there. And it allowed me, during these meetings, to get exposure on how other people think, and it also allowed Dover, assisted in Dover's awareness of cost expenses. And believe it or not, the last couple of years, Dover's antenna has gone up, and they've looked at things our way instead of just throwing money at things and saying it's okay. So I think that joint meeting has helped quite a bit. So when we have had meetings with the Regional School Committee and administration, things have come up that Dover in the past wouldn't have questioned. So I think it's been good for both of us. But I really think that because we still share 50% voice in management of the school organization and the administration, that's really all we want to do, is be able to get involved with the organization, the structure, and the education of the kids and students going forward and creating programs.
15 seconds.
I really don't think that this is something that should be opened up and looked at. I think we should look at how we can make it better instead of reopening the whole thing and saying we don't want it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, and Judy, the regional school agreement was signed back in 1952. A lot has changed between the two towns. Should this agreement be reopened and reconsidered to reflect the 2018 situation?
You know, I was hoping I would be the one who would get to answer this question first, because I agree with Vicki on pretty much everything that she said. You know, I took a look at the agreement from the perspective of an attorney, and you know, I read the enabling statute, and I don't think that it's going to be fruitful or possible to try to renegotiate that agreement, nor do I think it's really in our best interest. And I also agree with Vicki that the best way in which we can reduce costs is to partner with Dover in that effort. For example, you know, SPED costs, you know, special education costs, is an area that has always been difficult. And it's an area where getting those parts of the region that are not regionalized, the elementary schools, you know, to do more, you know, cross work, to work together more, and to have some of those students, you know, there's been talk about having some of the students be at different schools, Pine Hill or Chickering, to make a cohort of people with a particular issue, which could drastically reduce the costs. I completely agree with Vicki that constructive conversation, creativity, and consensus are the way to go in terms of our relationship with Dover.
Okay, great. All right, let's hit a little bit of an academic question. The region has received a lot of praise for implementing Challenge Success, and Judy, this is yours. The program which is geared toward reducing student stress. The region has also some of the highest test scores in the state and taxpayers who demand results. Are stress reduction and the constant drive for high test scores conflicting goals? And as a regional school committee member, how would you want to balance these needs?
You know, there's a math teacher at the high school, Steve Ryan, who I believe that both my kids had. And the legend goes, and I believe this is, I confirmed this with someone, that a number of years ago, in fact, I understand that Steve has told this to his classes. A number of years ago, he decided that he was going to do an experiment for a year and not overburden the kids with homework and give them very little homework. And at the end of the year, he discovered that, lo and behold, their test scores were exactly the same as the test scores of the students the year before. And it's obviously anecdotal evidence, but it really shows that test scores are not necessarily dependent on homework, and that, you know, in this day and age where anxiety and depression and teen suicide are increasing, more and more challenge success is vital for us to enable our kids to be successful and to be able to take on the challenges of more challenging work. You know, the Dover Sherborn school system is excellent at educating all students, educating students who have learning challenges, educating students who want to be pushed to take 5 AP classes. And challenge success only assists in that process. I am obviously a big supporter of challenge success, and I think it enhances the student test scores.
Okay. And Vicki, are these stress reduction initiatives and the constant drive for high test scores conflicting goals? And as a regional school committee member, how would you balance these needs?
So I don't believe that they're conflicting goals. I believe actually they can help each other. I've read the success program's 3-year summary, and it seems that the overall consensus of students is that a couple of things that were done is that the change in time to and from class was extended, and that helped their stress quite a bit. Their time to arrive in school was pushed to a later time, and that was helped also with the stress level for the students. They also mentioned that the education of parents as to how to manage homework specifically was very helpful, and that the students' ability to consult with advisors within the school on a regular basis actually helped reduce stress as well. There's continued work over the AP question, and I think that on how effective taking these AP courses are, so I think that's just an ongoing question for decreasing stress. So that should be something we should pay attention to going forward. But what I see as the most important part of it is education of parents and children together, so they're in sync with what's the best and what the school is promoting. And I just want to give you a little anecdote. I was subbing with 1st and 2nd graders, and I decided to try a little experiment. I do a lot of meditation because obviously everybody has stress in their life. So I started to do, after free period, I got the kids to meditate. And I don't know how many of you know about Headspace. It's an app that you can use. And so I had them all sit down, and I said, do you all know what meditating is? Oh, yeah, my father does it, my mother does it. Everybody, they understood, even at that level. And I said, okay, you know what we're going to do it for? And they said, yes, we want to calm down. So we did it for 5 minutes, and they all went into their position. It was very hysterical watching it. But when they finished, they sat there and I said, did you notice the difference? And they said, yes, we do. We're calmer, we feel better, so now we're going to go do our work. And they actually got up and left. So the stress reduction goes, it can start when they're very young, and if it starts then and it goes through, it helps quite a bit.
All right, so I'm going to pause for a second. Now's a good time if you have school committee questions to write them on your cards and pass the cards down to the middle for Grace to collect. Okay, great. Vicki, you go first on this one. We all want our children to have the special education services they need, yet the special education services are a significant part of the budget. What are your thoughts on managing these expenses?
Over the last 6 years on advisory, I have seen the SPED costs, specifically SPED costs, significantly decrease to a certain degree because we have, but along with that, we've had an increase of need for sped services. During the budgeting process, I have seen the current and most recent past administrations worked very hard to minimize cost by regionalizing some of the personnel as well as services. That was what Judy was alluding to in the prior question. I would say we are not going to eliminate the growth, but we can continually reevaluate the need and progress students are making and create programs that can be effective for these students that will allow for their personal growth as they continue through the system. One of the things we've also been doing is getting costs, updates of costs and expenses, and that has allowed for forward planning and what to expect on a grade level basis. So for example, the special ed reserve that we had last year that we used to buffer anticipated expenses helped quite a bit. So I think if that process continues and we continue to look at the services we can regionalize, the services we can bring in-house, it will continue to help us maintain and work on these costs.
All right, thank you, Vicki. Judy, we want our children to have access to special education services that they need, yet the special education services are a significant part of the budget. What are your thoughts on managing these expenses?
Creativity and consensus. It is incredibly important to look at problems anew and find new solutions to them. I know that the more significant portion and the more difficult portion to manage are out-of-district costs. But it is not a given that certain children have to be out of district. In addition, there's been an uptick in social and emotional disabilities, and students may be leaving the school district for those types of disabilities. The school has begun to really address that. We have, we implemented this year the Bridge program, which helps students who have to take time out for hospitalization, for mental health hospitalization or partial hospitalization, to be reintegrated into school, to be able to catch up on their work and to be able to have a support system. That's really crucial to maintaining those students in the school district rather than their parents throwing up their hands and going, well, we'll just get a consultant and then they can go to an out-of-district school. I think that also early intervention is a really important part of managing our SPED population. And I have to tell you something. You know, there are many students at the schools who have various levels and who have various needs. Okay, but early intervention has been proven to be a way to reduce those costs, and even looking at more creative solutions like working with other districts to create cohorts to keep students in district. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Judy, this is a financial question for you to start off with. The fiscal year 19 budget increased by 2.11% from the rising costs of healthcare, capital expenditures, special education, and general education, et cetera. Being mindful of fiscal constraints in Sherborn, how would you address these financial pressures as a member of the Regional School Committee?
Well, I found this to be a really interesting question, because when I looked at a 2.11 increase, and I thought about my years of experience, you know, negotiating collective bargaining agreements and dealing with salary increases in my time on the Personnel Board in 2008 and 2009 when money was really tight, I thought 2.11% for salary increases, which make up a huge part of the budget, isn't that high. And then I did a little research and found out that the U.S. inflation rate for 2017 was, you're not going to believe this, exactly 2.11%. And for the 12-month period ended March 31st, 2018, the inflation rate was 2.36%. So I really believe that our school committee, with the help of advisory, has done quite a good job. Yes, it is important to always keep our finger on the pulse of this and continue to make sure that we're not, you know, spending too much and that we're keeping costs in line. But I don't really have a criticism of the school committee for where the budget ended up this year.
Okay, thank you, Judy. And Vicki, so the FY19 budget increased by 2.11%, as we said. And so being mindful of the fiscal constraints in Sherborn, how would you address these financial pressures?
I agree with Judy. It was 2.11 is not high, and we did do a good job keeping everything in line with that. But what I would do is I would continuously work with administration to evaluate ways to reduce costs during the school year. So look at management of teacher resources and how that can be adjusted going forward if we need to. Like if there's a teacher that doesn't need to be there the next year because of population or changeover. We did that within the Sherborn School, and it worked very well. Actively and diligently work on major health cost reform and looking at what options there are out there for us to do something with that. Prepare for teacher contract negotiations with strategy and scenario analysis prior to negotiations. And I feel that going into these negotiations, there is some strategy and scenario play that we can do that we might be able to help us so that when we get to the table, we're not kind of looking at what's being given to us with options and try to, you know, backfill last minute with that. Continue to work with administration on budget management and support continued special ed efforts to control and anticipate costs with proactive budgeting. But other than that, I think you know, we're on that road going forward. I think everybody's mind is in the same direction. So the good news is we don't have to change mindset. It's just a matter of strategy and how we can adopt going forward.
Okay, great. So we're moving into the wrap-up mode, after which we'll do the questions from the audience. So Vicki, you get to start with this one. In the final 2 minutes that you have, is there anything that you want to share of issues that we haven't covered yet?
Well, I was surprised, and I know everybody's concerned about fiscal management. I was surprised there was a lot of questions on that and not on the quality of education. So as Judy brought up prior to this, I think that the quality of education is very important, and creativeness and learning how to learn is really important. I've reinvented myself more times than I want to think of, but when I was a teacher and I studied to be a teacher, I learned how to learn. And so in order to adapt to the world environment, if we can let the students, if we know that our students will leave grade 12 learning how to learn, I think they'll be well adapted for the world going forward. The other thing is, I think that college prep is not just grades. I think that they need to be helped with what world is being presented to them. And to that end, I think a lot of and I'm not just saying this because you're here, but I've done this with other programs, the seniors are a good source of knowledge to bring to the students, and I don't know how much interaction they have with senior community. I know that when I worked with some aftercare services in Framingham, some situations, I brought some kids in and worked with the elder. But I think just from in the workforce and seeing my kids go into the workforce, and I think that if they get some information from people that have been out there just to understand what responsibility is, what staying late means, you know, it's just, they don't have a perspective of that, and I think that's really a good thing to bring to the table for them. And I think that another important thing is that you know, they can have exposure to other things besides college, what college means after college. They don't have to go in, they can do other things besides, you know, there's other opportunities that they can work. So bringing in entrepreneurs, bringing in people in Boston that are, you know, doing different environments like we work, and explaining how those all work, because that's a difficult concept. So
okay,
I look forward to doing that.
Thanks. And Judy, in the last 2 minutes, is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to share?
Yeah, it was a toss-up between educational excellence and school safety, and I'm really glad I picked school safety. Because Vicki picked educational excellence without us conferring. The 2016 Metro West Adolescent Health Survey of Dover-Sherborn High School reported that 78% of DS kids have someone at the school, a teacher or a counselor, who they feel they can talk to about a problem. That means that 22% do not. Challenge Success this year did a similar survey and found that 28% of the kids said that they had no one at the school, an adult, a parent, or who they could bring a problem to. And as we know, from having looked at the tragedies, emotional issues, social and emotional issues are a component of some of these tragedies. In addition, the studies show that the number of students who feel that they're being bullied has also decreased, but there are still fully 21% of the kids who said they've been bullied recently. And so we really need to continue to work on creating an environment where all the students feel valued and respected, and one in which none of the students falls through the cracks. In addition, and I have much more to say on this, we really need to talk to and rely on our law enforcement professionals, one of whom I'm happy to see here tonight, to help guide us to make our schools physically safer. And I wish I could talk on and on about that as well, but I'm out of time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right, the first question from the audience is a juicy one. Judy, what is your opinion of Common Core?
Yeah, I heard a survey recently that the United States scored something like 21st out of all nations in terms of the quality of our public schools. But if Massachusetts had been a country, it would have been number 2. Okay? And I don't mean to be an elitist, but I think that we do a really fabulous job in this state of coming up with standards to teach our children by, and then evaluate whether we've done a good job, okay? I believe that our new MCAS 2 test, which I believe, as I recall, is going to be, either last year was the first year or this year is the first year, I can't remember, which incorporates many of the standards from Common Core, but goes beyond that. And so while Common Core may be a good thing, I think we do a bang-up job here in Massachusetts, and particularly here in Dover-Sherborn, of creating high standards and teaching our kids, and they meet those standards. And I think that that's really excellent. Thank you.
What I've seen from a lot of the reports that we have during school committee sessions is the way that the teachers constantly evaluate what the kids are doing and then constantly bring that back into the teaching aspect. So as Judy said, I think we do an amazing job. What strikes me in this whole scenario is that our teachers have really put their antenna up to make sure that they're aware of what's going on with the testing, that they don't omit things, that if they do omit something, that something's overlooked, that they bring it up. So I think that there's a constant back and forth that allows us to have that excellence. And I'm really comfortable with the way that we've run things in Dover-Sherborn.
Okay, thank you. The next question from the audience is, should the schools consider tuitioning in students from outside the community to generate marginal incremental revenue, meaning taking students from outside the community and charging them tuition?
I think this is you.
This is me, okay.
Yeah.
I think it's a controversial issue. I don't know, to be honest with you, if we really need to do that. I mean, I just never thought of it as a big issue to bring forward. I don't think we have to look that creatively to introduce revenue to the system. I think if we wanted to do it for reasons other than revenue, for diversity or something like that, it might be a better reason for doing something, but I don't think pure revenue would be a positive spin for me to go for it. I think it would be more for a diversity issue.
All right. What about you, Jean?
Yeah, a number of years ago, the notion was floated that because the number of babies being born was decreasing in the United States, that our census would begin to go down and down and down. But what I believe has happened, and I looked at the data for how many students were at the Pine Hill School for the last 10 years. And during that period of time, they went down during the recession period, and now they're starting to trend back up. And which says to me, and I will tell you that Michael in the back knows a lot better this stuff than I do, but I think that it would indicate that the real estate market, that our census at the schools is much more dependent on the real estate market than it is the number of babies being born, because Dover Sherborn, like Harvard, everybody wants to go to school here. There was a trend until the 2016 election that people would bring in foreign students who were clamoring, particularly students from China, who were clamoring to come here and would pay tuition to come to public schools and private schools here. And the thought was, and there were a bunch of organizations that would arrange for that. And the thought was, well, maybe we would attract some of those students and thus generate revenue for the schools. The problem is that with the shift in the immigration laws, that market has significantly dried up. And so I'm not sure that in 2018 that's really a workable solution.
Okay. And this is actually the last question. Judy, so you can start this one. You just touched on this, so you can expand a bit. Does the town understand what the projections are for changes in school-aged children in the coming decade? How will this affect budgets?
You know, in my law practice, I say to my clients, if I had a crystal ball, I'd be a millionaire. And there has been a debate about whether, you know, exactly what I was just talking about, whether our population is based on census or based on turnover of property. And you know, Frank alluded to this. People have children and they raise them here so they can go to the schools, and then the kids get to college and they move out, and I'm not going anywhere. So I guess I'll help the tax base. But I don't really. Yes, I think it's something that we need to be keenly aware of. And I think it's something that we need to consult with people who know far more than I do about these issues. But I don't think it's our highest priority these days.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Vicki, what about you? The projections for changes in school-aged children are down for the coming decade. How would this affect budgets?
It does affect budgets, and we do look at it. In fact, the last superintendent, the interim superintendent, brought some methodology to doing that, and actually, you know, from all of his experience in other school systems, started to look at Pine Hill school numbers and Chickering numbers and do some analysis on growth and projections so there is a way that we look at it for budgeting purposes. And there is no crystal ball, as Judy said, but there is a way to kind of look at forward and previous numbers and housing and all of that, put it together and come up with a methodology of analysis. So there is something that's put in place that we do now, particularly looking at the younger grades for that. So I think that we do have it in place. And you know, it's funny because I was in the post office the other day and I was listening to somebody talk about the 12-year plan and that they were out of there, and it just bothers me that people want to leave after 12 years. I mean, this is a great place to stay. So, you know, I mean, it's kind of an add-on. I needed to say that because it was really bothering. But I just think that, you know, there are ebbs and flows, but we do work at it. We do look at the numbers, and there are ways that you can evaluate things. It's not perfect, but at least gives you some way of budgeting it for it.
All right, terrific. Well, Vicki Rellis and Judy Miller, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks for everybody for coming out.
I know. It would be great.
Before we go, I want to thank Maria very much for being our moderator this evening. But behind the scenes, we have two timers down here, Libby Yan and Jim Campbell. I want to thank you two for your hard work. I want to thank you, Grace, for collecting all the questions from the audience, and everyone else who helped make this a successful evening. But the person I'd really like to thank is Pat Cassell for getting this whole thing videoed so we can watch it tomorrow. And Michael?
You know, there's been one individual that has stood for the entire period tonight. Now, I don't know if you know who that might be, but we're so fortunate to have Maria Caddison do her duty. She did a great job tonight. Let's give her a round of applause. She's sitting down. Thank you so much. It was a great evening.